New Dawn Fades, a play about Joy Division and Manchester, is currently touring the UK. Written by Brian Gorman, the play chronicles the life and times of the band and their legendary frontman, Ian Curtis. When the tour stopped off in Macclesfield recently, we went to give it a watch. And before the show, we sat down for a chat with co-producer Nigel Carr, who kindly gave us some of his time. We discussed the show, Joy Division, Manchester, and the significance of performing in Macclesfield, Ian Curtis's hometown. Okay, so we are here at the Heritage Centre in Macclesfield, where we're about to go and watch the play New Dawn Fades, a play about Joy Division and Manchester. And we are very grateful to be joined here by the co-producer of the play, Nigel Carr. Nigel, thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, like I said, we're backstage before the show, very excited to watch it. Could you give us an idea of what we can expect to see tonight?
So New Dawn Fades is a story of Joy Division and Manchester, and we include the Manchester bit because there is a psycho energy that flows backwards and forwards through the play in the mind of Brian Gorman, the playwright.
Right.
So we open like when General Agricola formed Manchester in 7 AD or something. I can't remember the exact date, but he comes on stage and introduces the fact that we're in Manchester, named Mamukium, breast-shaped hill. And the play kind of flows from there. It's the story of Joy Division intertwined with the history of Manchester and through the main protagonists of their time, from Friedrich Engels and John Dee, and one or two other luminaries who are part of the Manchester story. But fundamentally, it's the story of Manchester, Ian Curtis, how they formed, and the story of what happened over the next 3 years.
So this play was written by Brian Gorman, who
Yeah.
also plays Tony Wilson, the legend Tony Wilson.
He does.
He wrote it back in 2013, I believe.
He did. It was 12-13, and he got a book deal with Schuster and Schuster, the large publishers, but that fell through. And he said, then I'll do a graphic novel. So we started the graphic novel, and then he sort of toyed around with that, and then said, well, I'll turn it into a play. And he's been sort of acting and playwriting on and off for many years. Yep. He's done One Man Bond. He's done the story of Patrick McGoon, if you know, from The Prisoner, and various other sort of parts in plays and TV dramas and things like that. But this was the first time that he'd actually put a cohesive play together to run for about an hour and a half about a subject that, frankly, he had to research because he wasn't a Joy Division fan when he was a kid, but he was fascinated by the story of Ian Curtis.
Yeah, it is a fascinating. I grew up in Macclesfield, so I kind of know. I sort of grew up with the story of Ian Curtis.
Of course.
As you go through life and get older, you learn more about him and the band, and it really is a fascinating story.
But his story is central to this town, and that's why it's so important to come here.
Tony Wilson and Ian Curtis, two very different characters, but both equally fascinating in their own way. How much of a challenge was this to bring it to the stage?
For us, it had been running for 9 years with the original producer, who was a friend of Brian's called Giles Bastow. But it didn't really go anywhere. And whilst they put sort of 4 or 5 shows on per year, it wasn't really giving the sort of financial support that it needed to take it to the next level. So what happened was that I knew Brian from sort of 8-9 years ago because I went to see New Dawn Fades in 2016 at the Dance House. So it was a couple of years after the first one, which is at the Lasagowry on Charles Street in Manchester. They played to 25 people, one of which was John Robb, my partner in Louder Than War, and the other was Ruetta from Happy Mondays. So they brought it all together and they ran it on a shoestring for many years and just about managed to scrape through. And then Brian approached another friend of mine called Tony Davidson. Tony Davidson ran TGM Records and TJ Recording Studios on Little Peter Street in Manchester, where Joy Division happened to rehearse for 2.5 years. And also it's the old warehouse where the door opens and the Love Will Tear Us Apart video is recorded. Wow. So Tony is my co-producer, but I tend to do more of all the practical stuff of it and everything else. And so I'd done some previous work with Tony on his book launch on TJM and what went on at the studios. And we did a book launch at the Stoller Hall with Hooky on stage and Mike Sweeney and one or two other people. John Robb was there. And then so Tony approached me and said, well, you know Brian? Yeah. Well, he's come to me and said, well, I produced the play, but I don't really have the knowledge, the practical knowledge to put it all together. Right, okay, Now, I have a digital marketing company. I've been an entrepreneur for years and funded some things, not lots of things. So it's a very steep learning curve for me to be a co-producer. But together, with our pooled resources and our money, we could take it to the next level and then put it on properly at the RNCM and then take it down to the West End, which is what we did last year and what we're doing this year. Right. So it just needed some nurturing, some pulling together, some polishing and some money throwing at it. And because we've got the digital marketing company, we're very good at getting the message out through social media, Facebook ads, everything else. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how it's gone from being a shoestring production to something a bit more professional. And as I said to you before, we're going to the Lowry for 3 dates, which is the icing on the cake because they asked us. And it's already partially sold, which is incredible. Only went on sale yesterday.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Really good to hear. Excellent. And you've mentioned Peter Hook.
Yep.
And we saw a video on Instagram he recently introduced. Did he introduce the...
So, yeah, that was a funny one. So I got a message from Eve Altana. Eve Altana is the keyboardist, or was in Peter Hook and the Light. And Eve knows Brian. And Eve said, well, can I come to the Chester show? So he came to the Chester show. And then after that, he phoned me up because I gave him my number. It was about 2 hours before the show started at the RNCM. So, is it all right if I bring Hooky? And I went, let me just think about that. So I said, okay. I arranged for Hooky to come through into the car park, through the barrier. He came in through the back door and he sat stage side and watched the play all the way through. But he said to me, shall I introduce it for you? And I went, hang on a minute. Second one.
Think about that.
So he introduced it for us.
Was he a fan? Did he enjoy it? How did he...
I've not caught up with him after.
Okay.
Eve says he enjoyed it. He
good.
left soon after. I can only imagine, because every time I watch the play, because I'm a big Joy Division fan, I get upset. It chokes me up. And sometimes I don't want to watch it because I've seen it so many times.
Right.
But even seeing it 20, 30 times, I still get emotional. I can't imagine how emotional it must have been for Peter to see the play. Because it is raw and visceral, you know. Those scenes are powerful, but we make them powerful with respect. Absolutely. There's no exploitation in it, you know.
Do you know if the other guys of the band have seen it? Have they said anything about it?
I caught up with Stephen Morris at the Decades launch a few years ago and asked him if he'd seen it, and he went, no, it wasn't a very good movie. But it's fine, you know, maybe they'll drift in at some point, you know, and they're very, very welcome to come. It'd be wonderful if they could just drop in kind of one by one. We're just here, we're doing our thing, we don't want to take sides or anything, we realise there's rifts, you know, it's cool.
Great. So we'd like to just ask you a couple of questions about Joy Division. Unknown Pleasures is often hailed as the Mona Lisa of post-punk albums. It's a timeless classic that helped define the genre. In your view, what makes this album so essential for music lovers, and do you have any personal favourite tracks from it?
I think it's easy to look at the past through rose-tinted spectacles and to squeeze things through a 2025 lens because it fits the narrative. For me, I loved Unknown Pleasures. I thought it was a fantastic album, but equally I love Wire. I love Public Image, the first Public Image singles, an album. They defined what post-punk was, or almost a template for it. We never called it post-punk at the time.
Right, okay.
It was just punk. But when Wire came along, Public Image came along, and of course Joy Division came along, and they shed off their sort of raw punk roots where they started with Warsaw. It became this sort of post-punk genre, and there are a few bands like Istist who are sort of treading that path now. The thing about Unknown Pleasures was it wasn't a fun album. It was a deeply introspective album, delivered through the words of Ian Curtis that nobody really listened to. And it was only after Ian died that people went back and listened to the lyrics of what he wrote. And if you listen to Unknown Pleasures and the narrative that weaves its way through that and the lyrics that are used, and subsequently on Closer with, say, Love Will Tear Us Apart, for example, which I don't think was on Closer, but was the big single after he died. Why is the bedroom so cold? Why is the bedroom so cold? And this is the story of a relationship falling apart. And those lyrics that sort of are wound that Ian says how he's not worthy, and it's incredible. And it was an incredible album for me at the time. But it wasn't a fun album. It wasn't the album you could put on at a party. Yeah. It wasn't an album that you could impress your mates with. Yes. It was something that you would listen to.
Yes.
I didn't smoke a spliff, but maybe I would have done at the time. I just had a beer, Yeah. It was that type of album because Nevermind the Bollocks was the pinnacle of absolute excellence at the time. Yeah. And everybody loved that album, Damned, Damned, Damned. But when Unknown Pleasures came along in 79, and it was a pivotal year for that type of music, because Talking Heads' Fear of Music, you had Wires 154, which is in my top 3 albums of all time ever. You had London Calling, you had That's Entertainment by Gang of Four. You had those incredible albums all coming out in 79, of which Unknown Pleasures was one of them. Was it my favourite album of that year? Maybe Wires trumped it, but it was certainly right up there, and it resonated with a lot of people on a lot of different levels because it spoke to your soul, in a very different way. It was another level of entertainment.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's not an album it's not a party album, but it is an album that if you sit down and listen to it, there's so much depth to it, and so much emotion.
And the production was incredible.
Yeah, Martin Hannett as well.
But Martin Hannett was an incredible producer, but quite frankly, he wasn't really doing anything particularly new. But what Martin was doing was funneling everything that he knew about production and taking bits from here and bits from there, a little bit from Alice Cooper. Listen to Slick Black Limousine. It's actually It's actually very similar. To, they've all grabbed their influences from the past, as everybody does. But Martin was a genius in bringing all of that together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joy Division and their sound, it's almost otherworldly. That's kind of how I'd put it.
It wasn't on stage, but it was when it had gone through Martin's hands.
Yes.
Because on stage, obviously, they couldn't achieve the same compression on the drum kit, the dryness of sound that they did in the studio. Yeah. So on the stage, it all felt more open and more like, punk rock or rock and roll, But no, I agree with you. It was different for sure.
So in terms of trying to recreate the Joy Division sound, did you find that particularly challenging?
We didn't really. We experimented with a lot of different backing tracks. Eventually, we got, I'll say this openly, we got a Joy Division tribute band called True Order. Leon Florentine, and he produced the tracks for me.
Oh, wow.
And I listened to them, and I said, no, that bass line has got to go like this. Yeah. No, put the extra beat in before you start shadow play. At transmission, do this, and then so I directed it slightly just to try and make it as authentic as possible. Wow. I probably made it too dry, and it sounded like a studio track rather than a live track. Yeah. But it's what people I felt would expect to see if we were going to play it in the play. And so we have a backing track, but Jack's a real drummer. Gaz, who plays hooky, is a real guitarist and bassist, and Gariant plays a wonderful, fake guitar solo. So they all look like they're playing. And Ian's Josh Lonsdale, who plays Ian, sings live, and it's uncanny. He sounds like Ian Curtis.
How does the play capture the influence of Manchester on Joy Division's sound and identity? And how important was the city as a character in its own right within the production?
It's a very good question. And I think what was happening, you've got to really understand what was happening in the late 70s. When I was a kid in Manchester in the late 70s, you'd go into Manchester, and Manchester was a dreary place. Yeah. There were still bomb sites from the war. It was only 30 years after the war, right? And, you go at the back of Shude Hill, there were broken down warehouses, there was rubble. Yeah. And it's really, that is reflected in the play through the narrative, that the actors are bringing all of that to life. Describing how Macclesfield and Salford and Manchester were in the late 70s. And I truly believe that there is a Manchester sound. And if you're in a rat-infested warehouse off Little Peter Street in the middle of Manchester and it's raining through the roof, there's a bottle of urine on the floor and dead pigeons and whatever, and pigeon droppings everywhere. Tony painted all the walls dark brown. I believe that the essence of Manchester is filtered through the walls and into that music. And Martin knew that. Marty knew that you had to have that lift shaft music.
Yeah.
That lift shaft sample shoved into the beginning of the track because it perfectly reflected the industrial nature and the griminess and the dreariness of the city that, you know, they were working in. It's not like that now. It's like Hong Kong. It's like New York. It's high rise. It's all glossy. It's been gentrified. But back then it wasn't. It was very much like that. It wasn't completely black and white, but we tend to see those images through black and white because of Kevin Cummins, actually, because he was the one that photographed Joy Division more than anybody else. He took all the iconic images, you know. So it very much reflects, Joy Division very much reflected that feeling of the time, and we hope to present that through the play. We're in the perfect place here because this is kind of faded glory, isn't it? You know, a little bit cinema. It's almost like the perfect venue for it.
Yeah, well, was it important to come and do a show in Macclesfield?
I felt so, absolutely. It was Trevor Stokes that made the suggestion. He does the Joy Division tour around Mac. Lovely guy, got in touch with me, said, why don't you bring it to Mac? I said, well, we went to see Christchurch the previous year, and that was a challenge because we'd have to build a stage, we'd need scaffolding. None of the audience would be able to see particularly well because it was all pews. So what the challenges there in the middle of a tour were just too great. Now here, we can do it. We can bring in a sound engineer. It's not the RNCM with all the fancy lighting and everything else. But I watched it last night, and there's a beauty about it that you don't achieve anywhere else.
It's a really beautiful building, isn't it?
It's one thing having all of the sort of red velvet seats in Cheltenham Everyman or the Albany in Coventry, the RNCM, Leeds City Varieties where they did the good old days. Beautiful theatres. But for some reason here it's just got a particular magic. And it came out last night.
Well, don't know about you, Adam, but I can't wait to see the show.
Absolutely.
Really I hope you enjoy it. I mean, I hope I've not, bigged it up too much, but it really isn't. If you're a Joy Division fan, it's an essential, it's an homage to, Joy Division, the genre, and a respectful interpretation of what happened to Ian Curtis. He was wise beyond his years. You listen to those lyrics. They're unbelievable.
And Close is on another level.
Absolutely. That was the route to New Order. Listen to Atmosphere in Decades. You're into that and Disorder. You're into that sort of. You're going out into 1981 and the first album.
A last little question. We had a discussion on the podcast that if Ian Curtis was still around, in terms of the direction New Order went into, do you think he would have gone on that journey with them?
Absolutely.
Do you think?
I think they were headed into a sort of more dancey. There's a line in the play where Hooky goes, "Synthesizers? I'm not." Having synthesizers, but of course that's what Gillian brought to the fray. She brought those in. Right. Between Barney and her, they created these amazing soundscapes. That would go all the way from Blue Monday right the way up through, to Dodgy and everything else. All those great albums. I bought Substance in 1987, and you listen to Bizarre Love Triangle and fantastic. Confusion. They're just incredible tracks. And yes, they would have. Okay. I believe that, yes, they would have continued in this. The lyrics would have been more introspective. Of course they would. Because, the way Barney sings, they're slightly more basic in their nature. And I guess it would have had more depth to it. I don't know. Maybe it would have been a slightly different band. It's very difficult to say when somebody leaves.
Yeah, it is.
But I think it would have been the sort of same trajectory in terms of the music. But like I say, the lyrical content would have been a bit more dense.
Yeah, I can't imagine Ian Curtis singing World in Motion, to be honest.
Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. I never thought Paul McCartney would sing the frog chorus. But he did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Nigel, I'm sure you're a very busy man, so we'll let you get back to it.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I think we're going to go get a beer and then go watch this show. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the interview.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nigel.
So that was our discussion with Nigel Carr. If you would like to learn more about New Dawn Fades, you can visit their website at newdawnfades.co.uk. As for the show itself, I think it's a must-see for any fan of Joy Division. Brian Gorman's performance as Tony Wilson is superb, as is Josh Lonsdale's portrayal of Ian Curtis. As for us, remember you can always find us on Instagram or TikTok at onemoremusicpod. Remember to give us a follow so you can always stay up to date with new episode releases and news about the pod. You can also email us at onemoremusicpod@gmail.com.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you once again, Nigel, for chatting to us. It was much appreciated. That's all for now. We'll catch you again soon.